Hey everyone. Okay, so in this video there is no graphic footage or pictures or anything like that. However, this is an important and educational talk that I had from an activist named Justin, and he used to work in a slaughterhouse, and now he is sharing his stories of what he has seen in the various stages of animal breeding. Please, please, please watch. This stuff that he talks about is not common knowledge, so please use this information to make other people aware, or if you're not already vegan, use it to make better, more compassionate choices and not spend your money on flesh. Thank you so much for sharing, Justin. Thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot, and I know that everybody else at the Animal Liberation Conference appreciated your time too. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, it's Tanya from Vegan in Michigan, and I am, you'll probably see I have numerous videos up on my channel from the Animal Liberation Conference in Toronto, and this is our last day and we are at an action, and I'm with Justin Reinick. And so I'm going to do kind of a long intro, Justin. We'll get to him in just a second, but I want to share why I wanted to speak with you specifically about the topics that you spoke about. So the Animal Liberation Conference was a 4-day long event in Toronto, and we, my friend Rena and I, we were looking at like what breakout sessions they were called, almost like classes, which ones we wanted to go to. And so we happened to wander into this gentleman's class here, or speaking thing, yep. Breakout session. And he made us absolutely weep because of the stories that he shared, because of the experiences that he has had. And the reason I think I was so touched by what you were saying is because so often you hear people who still to this day believe in words like humane slaughter, and people who think that animals were put here for us and that it's just the most natural thing in the world, and they have no idea the horrors that these animals go through. They have no idea, and they don't want to know, more importantly. So my worst fear with this video is that people are going to shut it off right now. You know what I mean? Because of like, oh, this guy's going to talk about this stuff that's hard to hear. But maybe someone won't. Yeah, exactly. Maybe someone will keep listening. Yeah. And maybe someone will get touched the way we let your words get into us. And even though it made us cry, it's just so important to hear some of the things that you have in your head, and that I knew happened, but you just took it to another level, and you really do have a great way about you. And I told you that the first day. I was like, man, you kicked my butt in there. So I just want to ask you, I guess I don't know where to start, because I guess like maybe if you want to tell us, like, for people who might think that there's still a humane way to kill a pig, for instance, or a humane way that these pigs or these animals are living happy, healthy lives until the time that they're killed, or they're dying happily.
Almost this happy farm that people speak on, right?
Yeah. So what can you share your story with us?
So I kind of got into hog farming at a young age, kind of about 16 and a half, and I did it because I needed a job and I dropped out of high school. So I didn't really have many options for a job at that time. I lived outside of Winnipeg because I had moved out of Winnipeg. So didn't know my dad, and my mom left me when I was 13, so I was kind of on my own. So I had to support myself. So my aunt got me a job in a hog farm. So I started off just washing barns, just simple medial stuff. And then the company decided to sell that barn and asked me if I'd want to transfer to La Broquerie, back to more of my area. So I said, sure, why not? And they told me the position was going to be called Gene Transfer Technician. But let's put that into realism terms, and that's masturbating a boar. So, at 16 and a half, I moved back to La Broquerie and started masturbating boars for a paycheck. And, if we call it like it is, it's rather disturbing, right? And, as a 16, 17-year-old doing that job, for me, it was only money. And, it was a high-paid job with 3 bonuses a year. So I was clearing $50,000 a year at 17. So money was a big aspect of why I was doing it.
Okay, I'm actually gonna stop him for just 1 second, because you said masturbating a bull.
Yeah.
I don't even think people would have an idea that goes on. I bet you most people in the world have never considered how these animals are bred.
Yeah, exactly.
And that even is a thing.
Exactly. They almost think maybe a machine would do it, but no.
Or that they get to do it naturally out in the field and having, after a couple drinks and dinner.
Natural breeding, yeah. And to speak on that, we can't allow these animals in these pens to do natural breeding because it's too violent. So it's too much damage to the sow and she'll get hurt. So because these boars are pretty large, right? And in natural circumstances, we wouldn't be breeding them you know, 2 to 2.5 times a year, right? So she's really would be getting really abused by that animal, because in normal in the wild, right? You know, once a year, maybe every 2 years they'd have a litter, right? But here we're doing 2.5 litters a year. So yeah, that's why it's hard to make that connection to like where does the breeding start and how does it happen, right?
So when you hear people say something like it's natural for us to eat meat, it's like there's nothing natural about anything that's going on in any slaughterhouse anywhere, or even a farm, right? I mean, this is even in farms, this kind of thing is happening, you know?
Yeah, and I like what somebody was saying earlier, that we should almost stop calling them farms, because they're not farms. They're almost they're these production facilities, and you know, when you see a farm, you picture happy animals, and I think we kind of should move away from that term, because it is a true statement that, you know, these aren't farms, not your traditional anything. There's nothing humane happening in these situations.
So I didn't mean to like throw you off or anything, but like I said, that was such a that's what you got into detail with like the other day, and it was like these really detailed, horrific stories about like, okay, so once the bull has been, once you've collected the specimens from which is very expensive, worth lots of money, and those I said boar. The boar, what is the boar's life like?
Basically in a cage every day, and every 2 to 3 days they will be masturbated for their semen, and that'll be their life for 5 to 7 years, just going from the cage to the pen, and then from the pen to the cage, and that'll be it for him. And they'll grow to the tops of their cages, and you know, we won't get rid of them because they're worth so much money. They're money machines. So every vial makes roughly 50 bottles of semen. So, you know, you can imagine the money that's involved in that.
And then what happens after that,
Yeah,
if you don't mind?
So after that, we get into the farrowing department, right? Well, it would be the breeding department, sorry. But I guess my story goes into the farrowing area first. So, you know, as a farrower, you're helping birthing animals. So if an animal's in distress while it's being birthed, she can die. So you got about 15 to 20 minutes if the piglets are stuck in her, where you have to retrieve them. Otherwise, she's going to overheat and she's going to die because of the babies.
And didn't you say something about like the method that you guys use to impregnate her?
Yeah, I'll get to the breeding in a second. Yeah, I'll just do the farrowing, because this is kind of like the way I kind of went through the system. I kind of went from the boar stud, and I went farrowing, and then I was really kind of not happy in the farrowing department because it's kind of gross. You know, you're dealing after birth, and you know, you get to after the babies are born, 2 to 3 days old, they have to be castrated with no anesthesia and no painkillers, and just done by somebody no different than me or anybody watching this, and no training, no veterinarian techs possible. Just take a scalpel, 2 incisions, and 2 tugs of the testicles. And if you were to pull their intestines out, you got to shove them back in, and then tape up their wounds with elastoplast tape. And then to help their feet, because you cause so much trauma, we taped their feet together because they would splay out, and give the piglet a better chance of survival. And then they would also get their teeth clipped with no different than wire cutters, just 4 teeth clipped right away so that they're not hurting the other animals and causing damage.
Why would they hurt the other animals and cause damage?
Because there's nothing for them to do besides for hurt each other.
Social animals, and they need that love. They wouldn't do that in the wild generally. You know, they don't attack each other. It's those situations, the conditions that we keep them in, right?
Exactly. And then also the tail cutting with a hot garden shear torch to cauterize the wound so there's not as much blood. So these piglets go through an immense amount of trauma in the first 3 days of birth, and then they'll be allowed to grow to isoene weights, and then we'll move them into where they'll grow into your finisher pigs. But on my story, I went into the breeding side of things after, because I kind of had a hard time in the farrowing department. It was really gross, and it was hard to do some of the stuff because, you know, nobody likes to castrate animals. It's difficult. So I had asked to transfer, and I moved into the the breeding department. I wanted to try breeding. So breeding's a little bit different of a game, right? You're basically trying to decide when an animal's in heat, and then you want to rape her, and you want to take advantage of her so that she can be impregnated. And the better job you do, the more babies she'll have. So that's why it's really important for us as workers. We were told to do a really good job so that so the barn would make the most money possible. It all comes down to money. So when it comes to breeding, we'll have a boar walk in front of the sows in their crates, because once they're in the breeding area after being birthed, we'll bring them back into the cycle, into individual crates, and wait for them to come into heat. When they come into heat, we will have a bore in front of them, and when they are ready to be bred, we will artificially inseminate them with a catheter up their vulva to insert the bottle of semen inside of her. And then to help her absorb it, we will sit onto her or add saddlebags to simulate a boar on top of her, and even grunt and make noises to make her think in animals on top of her. So, like, I don't know, I make the connection, it's almost bestiality in a way, because it's just weird what you're doing to these animals now that I think about it. So, like, once you've bred her and she's taken the semen, you wait roughly about a month to do preg checking. And during that time, they'll be in the individual crates, because if they get any trauma during that first 30 days, they'll lose their babies, just like a human. And it's just same principles. You don't want any crazy trauma when you're conceiving, because it'll detriment your child. So once we preg check and find her pregnant, we'll bring her into the gestation areas, where it's just single pens, single stalls for each sow, and all she can do for 2 months is stand up, sit down, or lie down. No rolling over, no turning, no nothing, no walks. No walks, just some food and some water, and in the morning, one time a day too. It's not like they get fed twice a day. They get fed once in the morning, and that's it. So she'll stay in those gestation pens for up to 2 months, and once we're coming into the farrowing section, where she's ready to give birth, we'll pay attention to her signs, just like a human. Again, you look for discharge and all kinds of stuff, and then when you find her ready, you bring her into the farrowing department, where then we would start the farrowing process, and which I already kind of described. So, and then from that point on, once those babies have grown, we go into our finishing area, and that's kind of where I finished my career, was in the finishing area and breeding area. The finishing area was really difficult, because you would oftentimes come into rooms and find at least one dead pig. And, you know, sometimes if you didn't catch it soon enough, the other pigs would cannibalize because they want to play with something and they don't care what it is. And it's really tough to see that. So we would always have pigs in the pen middles that were dead, and oftentimes they'd be just left there for the weekend until the Monday, so it could be dealt with.
Are they by their moms at that time?
No, they're far removed from their moms. Yeah, they're removed from their moms after that first 3 weeks, and they'll never probably see her again.
And then what about the tattooing?
Yeah, so the slap tattooing is a new thing that a lot of people haven't really heard about. A lot of people wonder about what that tattoo is on the left shoulder of the pigs when they go into the facilities, and that's a tracking mechanism. So if there's any disease or anything happens, they can track the animal back to the barn. But in doing this, we have to very physically hit these animals with this long rod with a bunch of tattoos on it. In Manitoba, we have 8 numbers on our tattoo. They're about 1 inch by 2 inches, and they're full of spikes, just like a tattoo, like an old school tattoo press. And so we dip it in an ink pail, and you stand in a pen of about 30 animals, and you stand in the middle, and as they go by, you just hit them as hard as you can. And you want to make sure you hit them and the tattoo is legible, because if it's not, you have to do it again. And if it wasn't legible and it goes to the processing facility, the barn will not get paid for it. So the pressure is up top to hit these pigs as hard as you can so that this number is legible. And you know, there's no humane way to do this, and there's no nice way to do this. And you're adding to the trauma before they load onto these trucks. So it makes it even harder for us to load them onto the truck if we've just hit them with this big metal rod. So they're 10 times more scared, and removing them from the facility and forcing them onto these trucks, either with loud noises, yelling and screaming, and then pure violence if they don't want to go. Kicking, punching, and wheelbarrowing the pigs up, lifting up by the back legs, throwing them onto the truck, whatever we have to do to get them on, because at the end of the day, the truck's got to leave, and, you know, we got the pressure from the top again.